but actually they've been are manipulated in ways that they don't understand. Somewhere in the presentation he made two statements that I want to insert at this time. I don't remember just where they were made, but they're valid as in terms of the general overall view. The one statement: people can carry in their minds and act upon two contradictory ideas at the same time, provided these two contradictory ideas are kept far enough apart. And the other one, the other statement is, you can know pretty well how rational people are going to respond to certain circumstances or to certain information that they encounter. So to determine the response you want, you need only control the kind of data or information that they are presented or the kinds of circumstances they're in. And being rational people, they'll do what you want them to do. They may not fully understand what they're doing or why. Somewhere in this connection was a statement admitting that some scientific research data could be, and indeed has been, falsified in order to bring about desired results. And here it was said, people don't ask the right questions. Some people are too trusting. Now, this was an interesting statement because the speaker and the audience, all being doctors of medicine and supposedly very objectively, dispassionately scientific, and science being the be-all and end-all, well, to falsify data, scientific research data, in that setting is like blasphemy in the church. You just don't do that. Anyhow, out of all of this was to, on the political scene, was to come the new international governing body, probably to come through the UN and with the World Court, but not necessarily through those structures. It could be brought about in other ways. Acceptance of the UN at that time was seen as not being as wide as had been hoped. Efforts would continue to give the United Nations increasing importance. People would be more and more used to the idea of relinquishing some national sovereignty. Economic interdependence would foster this goal from a peaceful standpoint. Avoidance of war would foster it from the standpoint of worrying about hostilities. It was recognized that doing it peaceably was better than doing it by war. It was stated at this point that war is obsolete. And I thought that was an interesting phrase because obsolete means something that once was seen as useful is no longer useful. But war is obsolete, this being because of the nuclear bombs. War is no longer controllable. Formerly, wars could be controlled, but if nuclear weapons would fall into the wrong hands, there could be an unintended nuclear disaster. It was not stated who the wrong hands are. We were free to infer that maybe this meant terrorists, but in more recent years I'm wondering whether the wrong hands might also include people that we've assumed have had nuclear weapons all along. Maybe they don't have them. Just as it was stated that industry would be preserved in the United States a little bit, just in case the worldwide plans didn't work out, just in case some country or some other powerful person decided to bolt from the pack and go his own way. One wonders whether this might also be true with nuclear weapons. When you hear that he said they might fall into the wrong hands, there was some statement that the possession of nuclear weapons has been tightly controlled, sort of implying that anybody who had nuclear weapons was intended to have them. That would necessarily have included the Soviet Union, if indeed they have them. But I recall at the time of wondering, are you telling us or are you implying that that this country willingly gave nuclear weapons to the Soviets. At that time, that seemed like a terribly unthinkable thing to do, much less to admit. The leaders of the Soviet Union seemed to be so dependent on the West, though one wonders whether there might have been some fear that they would try to assert independence if they indeed had these weapons. So, I don't know, it's something to speculate about, perhaps. Who did he mean when he said if these weapons fall into the wrong hands? Maybe just terrorists. We'll see. Anyhow, the new system would be brought in, if not by peaceful cooperation, everybody willingly yielding national sovereignty, then by bringing the nation to the brink of nuclear war. And everybody would be so fearful as hysteria was created about the possibility of nuclear war that there would be a strong public outcry to negotiate a peace, and people would willingly give up national sovereignty in order to achieve peace, and thereby this would bring in the new international political system. This was stated, and a very impressive thing to hear then. If there were too many people in the right places who resisted this, there might be a need to use one or two, possibly more nuclear weapons. As it was put, this would be possibly needed to convince people that we mean business. And that was followed with a statement that by the time one or two of those went off, then everybody, even the most reluctant, would yield. He said something about this negotiated peace would be very convincing. This kind of in a framework or in a context that the whole thing was rehearsed, but nobody would know it. People hearing about it would be convinced that it was a genuine negotiation between hostile enemies who finally had come to the realization that peace was better than war.
Are you talking to me? No way, punk!